What's going on, world? Welcome back to another edition of the Black Mental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Reg. Joined today with me is a fellow podcaster, fellow healer out here doing the work. Probably just came from a session.
Yeah.
While I don't introduce people, brother, because I want y'all to give all y'all credentials so the people ears can perk up and they can know they listening to somebody that got something to say. So please let the people know who you are and what you do.
Yes, sir, bro. That's the same thing I do. So now I know what that feels like when I'm on somebody else's podcast. But yeah, Reg, thank you for having me here. I'm Jason Phillips. I'm a licensed therapist, confidence coach. I work with anxiety, stress, trauma as a therapist, as a coach. I help people with burnout, stress, exhaustion, mindset. And I'm also the host of the Peace and Prosperity podcast. And just super excited to be here. And ready to get into it.
Yes, sir. So how did you get into the work? We always talk about like the journey of like, even when I get therapists on here, when they ask questions, what's the question is gonna be? I'm like, y'all always giving advice about trauma, depression. Y'all got that. There's a bunch of probably conversations out there about that. But what got you into the work in the first place?
Yeah, no, great question. So one, just being curious about like why people do certain things and why people struggle with certain things. So, like for instance, certain people in our community struggle with weight, struggle with addiction, struggle with not getting their finances to a place where they can be financially secure. And I always just wonder at an early age, like, why is this person successful in this area and this person is not? Like, they're in the same household, we're in the same neighborhood. And I was just very curious. So that led me to study psychology. And then studying psychology, you know, how the brain works, human development, genetic predisposition, all of that was helpful. And then that led me to social work, which was kind of like toward the end of my undergrad career, where I found out about masters in social work or clinical social work, which was actually helping people with their thoughts and behaviors, but also making sure that their basic needs were being addressed. And that led me to being a licensed clinical social worker.
So now I gotta ask you, because you're a brother and you're in a mainly white woman dominated field. And
Mhm.
how was the schooling? I don't even want to say how was the schooling process. Let's skip past that. How are you now combining the knowledge that you got in a white woman dominated field with being from a community that is not a very much talked about language? I feel like a lot more people are having a conversation now, but like it's not a natural conversation. How do you combine the two?
No, great question. And I'll say, you know, I'm from Detroit. So, you know, I'm from inner city with mostly black people, and then going to Eastern Michigan and U of M. I was like, it was a couple hundred of us in our class, but only a handful, if that, of black males. So you're right, it's very white female dominated. So I combine my experience by one, just owning who I am, making sure that I don't try to change who I am, as far as I acknowledge my background and what I bring to my therapy sessions, my coaching sessions, because that's needed. That's why people seek me out, because I am a black male. So I embrace that. And it took a while to make sure that I always embraced it, because as a new clinician, I wanted to make sure I was helping my clients, sticking to the treatment plans, treatment modality. And it's not that I ignored, but I did not fully involve who I am. But as now, as kind of like a veteran in the game, I know people need that. Like, they really need that. So I make sure I show up as myself.
Mm. You're in a unique space, and I want to ask you, because you said it in the beginning that you operate as a coach and as a therapist, and so
Yeah.
what's the difference between the two? One, and then the second part, and you can answer in however way you want to. There seems like there's like a confusion on the two, and it's like two different communities, like life coach versus therapist almost. Can you talk about the duality of both of them?
Yeah, great question. So I'll try to make it simple, and then I'll go into more details. As a therapist, we are looking to make sure that you are functioning, meaning how you're feeling, how you're sleeping, how you're eating, how are you managing your emotions. And as a coach, specifically as a life coach, and I specialize with confidence, I'm helping you to flourish. So I'll give you an example of somebody who's appropriate for different, which different type of service. If we're on a consultation call and you tell me that you just broke up with your partner and you're struggling with getting out of bed, you feel like you lost motivation, you really starting to, like, your work performance is dropping, you're not talking to your friends. And this has been something that's kind of been a pattern, but you've never had it addressed. So now you're starting to ruminate at night. You have a lot of racing thoughts. You can't sleep. At that point, I would not want to take you on as a life coaching client. Not saying that you can't benefit from a coach, but I want to make sure that you're functioning properly. Meaning, like, your daily activities are going well, you're healthy, you're making your appointments, your anxiety's being addressed, your depression's being addressed. If there's any trauma from the breakup, how do we manage that? That would be a person who I would want to refer to therapy, or if not, provide therapeutic services myself. Now, same person who is getting over a breakup, but now they also want to switch careers. And now because of that, they're moving to a new city and they feeling like, hey, I'm a little nervous about this. I'm not sure if I'm good enough to just start over by myself. I'm insecure about where I'm at. I'm maybe you've been married for 20 years and now everything is new. You're still, functioning. So you're still going to the gym, you're journaling, you have a healthy support system, but you want to be able to take it to the next level and work on some maybe imposter syndrome characteristics or traits. That would be somebody who I would work with for confidence coaching.
Mm. Nah, and I wanted to stay right there. What made you want to specialize in confidence? You could have focused on anything else with every type of coaching. Like, what made you want to focus on confidence?
Something that I was passionate about, something that I knew I could help people with. So as a therapist, there's a lot of overlap between coaching and therapy. I know that some people, like coaching versus therapy, but I would say they can complement each other because you have to build a relationship with your client, whether you're a coach or a therapist. There's a treatment plan for a therapist. There's goal setting for coaches. So you're still working towards something. But me specifically, being really good with working with anxiety, I started to notice after people were being able to manage their anxiety, they still needed help with confidence.
Mm.
And they needed help in being secure, being able to own who they are. And that's what drew me into confidence. And knowing myself, how having more confidence has helped me, it was just more natural to help somebody else.
Mm. No, and I honestly, just to close the question on life coach versus therapist, what do you say? And I'm glad that you are both, so I can ask you this. What do you
Yeah.
say that to those people, those therapists who say, like, there's no accreditation for like being a life coach? Anybody could just wake up tomorrow and be a life coach, and like, what qualifies a life coach to even give that type of advice? Because you can't coach someone out of depression almost. Like, and you again, you or suicidal thoughts. I'll use something more extreme. You can't coach
Right.
someone that's having, like, they're ready to like have that suicide ideation. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, every coach, there is no like, it's not a regulated field, even though you have the ICF and different ways you can be certified. It's not the same as a licensing board, which what the therapist has. So I would say to the therapists who are skeptical about coaches, I would embrace it because some people just will not see a therapist.
Mm.
And the more that we can empower coaches to know how to refer out, I know there are some mental health coaches, and I'm not so sure about what those lanes look like, but we have to know that there are therapists who are doing harm too.
Mm.
So not every therapist is a great therapist. Not every coach is a great coach. And I think that the more that we kind of bump heads with one another, as opposed to embracing one another, we're going to just help less people.
All right, Jason, you brought it up, so I gotta go there. What do you mean when you say there are a lot of therapists that's causing harm?
You go. Okay, no, seriously, let's talk about it because sometimes therapists just they pass the licensing board, they have the degree, but maybe they're not practicing with a supervisor. So
Mm,
meaning we should have clinical supervision no matter how long you've been in the game. Even myself, I've been in at therapy for over 10 years, and I still seek out supervision to make sure that what I'm providing to my clients is not just from my own clinical opinion, my own background, but I have someone else to give me guidance to make sure that I'm not missing something.
mm,
Not all therapists do that. Again, I know what lanes that I'm really good at, specifically anxiety, specifically trauma. I'm not the expert when it comes to traumatic brain injury. I'm not the expert when it comes to psychosis or severe mental illness. Do I know how to manage that? Yes, but that's not the lane that I've been just highly successful at, or that's
mm.
not my specialty. And some therapists spread themselves way too thin by working with everybody and just not knowing, when to, like, now I'm talking a lot because I'm on your podcast, but sometimes therapists they're over talking their client. So the clients are not even getting any type of transformation because all they're doing is listening to the therapist as opposed to the therapist being able to use the Socratic questioning, the motivational interviewing, the questions that need to be asked to help the client get from A to B.
Mm. Nah, and that honestly, full transparency, I'm in school, I'm in school right now in behavioral health. Where I decide to go with it,
Okay.
I don't know.
Right.
And one of the reasons why is I started this podcast since 2018. I didn't go back to school until last year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was I care a lot about the mental health community and people that are dealing with certain things. And one of the battles was with, all right, I can become a coach, but then it was like it didn't feel right without having that other tool in your tool belt. So you kind of are in this moment. I just thought about it. You are kind of what I would um what is the word? Strive. There we go.
I,
Strive
okay.
to like kind of navigate those two fields because I do think they're value in both. I look at it almost like when you look at sports and you look at Stephen A. Smith versus Shannon Sharp, and one was on the field, they actually played the game, and one went to school and they actually studied, and there's a value
Yeah.
concept to both of them. And that's why I kind of
Yep.
think they
Yep.
work together with one another.
And Reg, I'm glad you said that too. So, like, full transparency, when I first graduated from University of Michigan with my social work degree, I knew I wanted to go into private practice, but I knew that school did not prepare me for that. So I took a mini course, and in that mini course about launching your private practice, the therapist, who was a white female, she talked about how she does therapy and coaching.
Mm.
Now, again, this is like right out of grad school. So it was like 2010. And I was like, whoa, coaching, what's that? Like, I knew about it, but now I had somebody in front of me who was telling us how she builds for one, how she separates the sessions and all of the logistics of it. So now I say, okay, this can be done, and I have a model. Sometimes we don't have a model, so we think either we don't know how to do it or it just shouldn't be done.
Mm. Oh man, that was well put. And especially when you're trying to carve out a new lane into something in a different capacity to a different community. It works over here. They say that's what the best business people do. They take something from a different industry and apply it to there, and that's how it kind of like best boom off. I want to kind of switch gears a bit and talk about something that I've been struggling with a little bit. I always say, and listeners, I always say when you get a therapist in the room, they're gonna charge for this tomorrow. So I'm gonna get the free one now. So while they charge, so pay attention so they charge for tomorrow. Um, this idea, this phrase I've been struggling with of gentleman, and I think we hear it. I think we know what it kind of means, but I'm feeling like there's a conflicting interest of both of them, because what has been put in as a definition of a man almost like completely goes against what being gentle means, if that makes sense. And I'm like, can you really be a gentleman, or how does that look like? Redefining that. You get what I mean? Redefining what a man is and what gentle can look like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So let me ask you another clarifying question. What part are you struggling with that?
Um, understanding that all right, again, in the mental health realm of being around therapists, being in school and things like that, and understanding the vulnerability aspect of it, and then what's being a man is, all right, I'll put it in better context. You're a man, you're a therapist, right? And you understand the need to be vulnerable and express emotions and have whole space in X, Y, and Z. And on the other end of that, being a man, you from the D, where if you look weak, and they will test you, or if you don't go anywhere and hold your space, like they will take advantage of you. So those two worlds colliding, and I almost feel like that's conflicting beliefs when it's called gentle men, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is. That's a good point. You brought it like real talk to home for me, because my life in Detroit looked different than my life when I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in grad school. So that's a good point. But I think that we have to define what we want it to look like for us. So one, I do think labels are helpful, but I don't like go too super deep into them. So I know there's some labels out there that, men and you heard simp.
Yep.
What were some of the other terms before simp?
Well, I
I
know
guess
one. Whipped was an old one. You whipped.
whip, soft. But I think you and I, like, we have to be able to redefine what that means and what that looks like, especially being in a mental health profession. Because now, and I think that's happening. So now it's more acceptable, or even we're appreciated as Black male mental health professionals. Whereas like 10 years ago, it was like, huh, what you do? But now it's like, oh, you do that? I need to talk to you. I know somebody right now who's looking for you. So by doing that, we kind of reframe gentlemen, and we can make that look like what we want it to, and not have any negative connotation behind it.
I gotta give you some pushback,
Go
and
ahead.
the reason why I'm giving pushback is because I agree with you that we are redefining it. People online, people are looking for you, or they're seeking out services X, Y, and Z. The pushback comes from, I just was in a school the other day working with kids, and those are kids, and I won't say the age range, but those are kids that I grew up around, that they kind of having it. I'll give you an example of where we were talking about gymnastics, and he was like, I ain't doing no gymnastics, I'm a boy. So I'll give you that like aspect of it. Second part is, when I go, I'm not in the hood as frequent as I used to be when we lived there up to a point. But when I go in the hood, it's still a lot of toxic masculinity. And when I say toxic, meaning it ain't as gentle online as it is online. The third part about it, I'll look in it too, and I'll add it as a pushback, is the music is still the same, where you hearing how they, and I love a good song. So I'm not even like trying to go against it. I bump it, I play it, or whatever the case may be. But the music is still kind of toxic in the sense of the way it degrades women. It degrades your fellow brother. I'm looking to kill you. I'm looking to go. So it's like, is it really there, or is it kind of there, if that makes sense?
So I'll break each one of those down. So first, when it comes to gymnastics, I think, and being from the D, I didn't flip a whole lot. Like, I could do the fronts, but I wasn't doing the backwards, the no hands, the genies. Do you remember that stuff? So the aerial. So all of these things that men or young boys, whatever, were looking at as soft or not manly, we were the ones who were crushing it in the hood. Like, when I think about flipping and gymnastics, I think about my friends who were flipping off of houses, gates, sometimes onto mattresses, sometimes not. They were doing, again, no hands, genies, super twist.
I remember it all too. We used to run in the grass. We used to try to do the double flip and do all that. I know what you mean.
Yeah. So we were doing it, but when you get into a stage or an arena where now you're a gymnast, it's different. And why is it different? Because of the persona and the attire. We were doing it in old sweats and t-shirts and hoop shorts. Now you put on a uniform for it, and it's like, oh wow, I can't rock with that. So that's perception, because you're already doing it, but you just don't want that label. So we have to do a better job of educating us on, like, this is not a bad thing. This is something that I don't remember that we've already been doing. I don't remember any girls when I was growing up being good flippers, or like, I don't remember that. Like, I just don't. They could do cartwheels, but that was about it.
No, I'm with you.
And then, crap, I get old, so I forget sometimes.
No, I'm with you.
The second piece about what was the last piece you touched on?
Well, I remember I said the music. I remember the other.
Oh, the music. Yeah, the music. The music is contradictory, because the same artist that you'll hear, saying one thing on record, they're doing events and things to promote mental health or to promote women empowerment. So you got to be able to discern what you're listening to too. So, like, just because, and again, this takes education and maturity, just because they're saying it on the wax does not mean that that's what they're living. And the more that we can empower our youth to know, like, hey, this is what they're saying, but this is not always what they're doing, then the better off we'll be. Because if we only go by the music and think that's how we're supposed to live, we're gonna be in trouble. Because I grew up, I think I'm a little older than you. Probably I'm 37, so
30. So yeah, you're right.
yeah. So listening to Death Row, Bad Boy Records, and then No Limit, and they came around later. But I had to know that the same stuff that they were talking about is not stuff that I needed to live out.
No, that was good. And the third one was community. When I still got some uncles that's on that same type of time. Like, as much as I talk about what I talk about, they still like, hey, you gotta get it how you get it. You gotta do what you do. Or when you go in the community, I still got old friends that they still on. I had to separate myself, of course, but they still on the same time. So I'm like, is it transitioning, or is it like only in its own little bubble, like that we kind of think is there?
I think it is. So, like myself, I was talking to one of my barbers, and he was talking about mental health and how he has talked to a therapist and he's referred people to a therapist and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, this is good, right? And then I told him that he didn't even know I was a therapist, but he was just talking about it. So that was one thing, right? He didn't even know my field, but he was talking about it. But then you may have some brothers who are still opposed to it, but right now we're in a really critical position where the paradigm is shifting. So, like, either some of us are going to stay stuck in that old mentality, and then some of us are going to grow. Now, we're not going to be able to catch everybody, but the ones who we can catch, we have to really lean into them and pour into them. That's what I was saying. Like, everybody's not going to see a therapist, and some people may not see anybody. But the more they can listen to podcasts like yours and mine, at least now we're giving them some type of mental wellness support that may get them closer to seeking out more professional one-on-one support.
No, I like that. And I wanted to switch gears a little bit too, because I'm thinking about, all right, those men who are healing, who are doing the work, right? And you can apply this to any spouse or any partner within a relationship, but specifically just talking to men, or talking about men. Say I'm doing the work and you work with couples and you're married. Like, I'm talking about you, Jason. You as a provider, like you work with couples and you're married. You're working with a man who, I'm doing the healing, but my partner has to do their work, and I don't know how to, not convince them, but it is now causing strain within the relationship because I'm doing the work, but it's not. They have to do their own individual work before we can do a work as a couple. What advice would you give, or what kind of counseling would you give to a person that's in that type of situation?
One, I would validate them for doing the work and hold space for them to know that it's very tough when you want somebody to do what you think they should do for their mental health well-being, for the betterment of your relationship, and they're not doing it.
Mm.
So that's the first thing I would do so that they feel heard and listened to. The second thing that I would do is encourage them to continue doing the work themselves, because the best thing that you can do for you is take care of you and be an example of what doing the work looks like. So if my partner doesn't want to engage in therapy right now, for whatever reason, whether that's individual or couples work, let me keep doing the work on myself over time so that I can get the benefit. And if there ever comes a point where they say, hey, I'm thinking about doing what you've been doing, I'm a perfect example of what that can look like if you remain consistent with doing the work.
Mm. No, I like that answer. I'm gonna keep it right there and ask you about how do you turn for yourself the therapist hat off and the husband hat on when you want to kind of fix your problems in the relationship.
Yeah, I try to take my therapist hat off as much as possible. Like when I'm talking with friends, family, like, and I'll give an example. There are certain people who are close to me who have been dealing with things, and because I just saw them as a friend or a family member, I never really picked up on it as a therapist.
Mm,
Because like if me and you were boys, I'm looking at you as my dog, my boy. Like now until like things become blatant, then I'm like, oh crap. Like Reg, man, maybe you need to like talk to somebody about this, but I'm not going to try to diagnose you. So with my partner, I'm not trying to diagnose my partner. If we have disagreements or conflicts, I don't want to be her therapist. So it's kind of it's easier because after doing the work for, like you said, for a while, like I had sessions today. If after this podcast, you're like, hey man, I gotta talk to you about some stuff, I'll listen, but it's not something that I'm like wanting to do, right? So having good boundaries with for myself and for the people around me, especially like my wife and other close family and friends, has been super helpful. But then also I want to make sure I'm there if they do need me to guide them to somebody else.
all right, another personal one for myself, and just
Mm-hmm.
to pick your brain around it. And it's not even for myself. Let me not say that. We so you we talked about the movement of healing that's happening within the culture right now, where people are more prone and open to it. And so say for yourself, you have a parent that's from a different generation, and they have experienced different things than you have experienced, right? And so I think
Mm-hmm.
about the kids who are experiencing healing right now, and adult kids who are experiencing healing right now, but they're dealing with a generation that they never had to deal with that. Talk about that experience and how to navigate through that.
Ooh, that's a tough one because that's something that I can relate to a whole lot. Because I see it in people close to me, and I definitely see it in a lot of people that I work with. Where the words that stand out is I help them with boundaries and expectations.
Mm,
So, for instance, if I'm working, I'll use you as an example. If I'm working with you, and you're starting to do a lot of work on yourself, and you're thinking like, man, but my parents, my mom or my dad, they keep involving me in things that I don't want to get involved with, or they keep coming to me about their relationship or their problems with their siblings, and it's starting to weigh on you. So now you would have to set the boundary with your parent or parents, and that takes time. So we have to walk through, how do you have that conversation? What do you say? How do you remind them? Because setting a boundary is something that has to be done repeatedly. You don't just do it once. And then what are the expectations that you have for your parents? So now I don't want you to be resentful every time your mom says, hey, Reg, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me? Because I know you go to therapy. So why don't you do it on me? Right. So I'm going to give you the language, or I will help you with the language, and then the expectations that your parents, because they're in a different generation, they may struggle with it. But if you can help educate them on, how to get their own support, and that you can't be that type of support for them, eventually you'll not build up resentment, because you don't want to have resentment towards your parents, and you can enlighten them on resources that they can take advantage of outside of just talking to you.
And you said something important that I wanted to go in a little deeper on, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm now I got to the phase of learning boundaries, right? And not just anybody, not even just myself. Just you got to the phase of like, oh, it's how the importance and significance of setting boundaries. What we don't talk about enough is setting boundaries also hurts relationships in some capacity, right? And
Yeah.
now a person was dealing with you in one way that they can no longer deal with you anymore, but that you have now caused harm to the relationship that was. So like even if it wasn't healthy, there was something there, but now because you set this boundary, you did block off the relationship. We don't talk about the hurting part of like the boundary setting, and how does one get past it where you know it's healthy for you but it's hurting someone else.
And you asking some good ones. So that's real, right? So anytime you set the boundary, you're interrupting a system. And if you're setting a boundary with your loved one that is helpful for you, your emotional well-being, and they don't like it, there's going to be some pushback and tension. So now you have to recreate or reform what that relationship is going to look like. Remember, the goal of setting a boundary, it is to protect yourself and have a better, healthy relationship, but it's not always to push somebody out of your life.
Mm,
So if you can set the boundary and still maintain the relationship, that's most important if you can do that.
mm,
But then also you have to remind yourself, why did you set this boundary in the first place?
mm.
Then I would ask yourself, what would life look like if you did not set the boundary? And then lastly, what is life looking like for you now with this boundary set? Because I don't want you to look at this in one particular way and you think, oh man, I set a boundary, I'm a bad person. But I want you to embrace it. I set a boundary, it was tough, and now I have XYZ, and these are the benefits. Sometimes we look so much at the negative and we don't highlight the benefits of setting boundaries.
Man, you speaking facts right now, and I know somebody. I know somebody getting blessed on that because we don't. I had a person on talking a few weeks ago where it's like they're in the part of healing where it hurts, and I don't think people. We talk about the benefits of coaching, we talk about the benefits of therapy, but that is hurt, man. Like that, it hurt to really go through and shift mindsets and shift relationships. I'm sure you know that from speaking, coaching, therapy, and podcasting. The person on the other end that's receiving those things, they're about to go through some pain to get to the pleasure that they're seeking.
Mhm. Yeah, I say a lot of times when I'm working with my clients is like that initial session and even the work in between it, it's like that's when you're going through surgery. So people don't want to go through surgery, but they know they need to go through surgery. Now, the sessions after that, that's where the physical therapy takes place in the healing. So if you just come in for the beginning, you get the surgery, but you don't do any type of physical therapy, you may mess yourself up even more than what you were before you started. So go through it all, follow through with your PT, your physical therapy, because you want to come out healing on the other side, not still broken and feeling like, why did I do this?
Mm, that was a great analogy, man. That's a great analogy. Talk to me about the podcast. We talked about it, or you mentioned it earlier, and I love to get a fellow podcaster to shine. But what can people expect from the podcast? What was you looking to achieve when you started it?
What they can expect is transparency, just me sharing life experiences, clinical experiences, um, pieces of education and nuggets. And so that's what they can expect, me just to show up as myself. What made me start it was being on so many podcasts. Honestly, it I mean, people would come people close to me were like, hey, you should do your own podcast. And I was like, I don't know. I got a lot of stuff going on. I don't know if I want to do that. And it's been a journey. I do enjoy it. And then now I started bringing guests on. So that's always fun. So we're talking about confidence. My podcast, the Peace and Prosperity podcast, focuses on self-love and self-confidence. How can you love yourself better? And how can you be more confident about who you are and what you bring into this world? So those are the conversations that we have.
Mm, man, that it sounds similar stories where started this podcast was just having those type of therapeutic conversations, and it wasn't therapy, but I felt like the conversations alone could have helped somebody at least put the process of like thinking about this in their ecosystem. And so I definitely understand that. um I got a challenging question, so let's you can take some time to ponder it and work through the thought. What do you feel like is missing from the conversation around wellness? And the reason why I asked that is to kind of put it in perspective. I feel like there's a lot of conversations around wellness that's happening or mental health, but I'm sure as a therapist, as a coach, or as a person that's been in these experience, what's something that you like? I wish more people will focus around this because this, helps out with this.
I think one thing that's missing would still be from us sharing our experiences and holding ourselves accountable. So I like the fact that you asked more personal questions than other podcasts that I've been on, which was cool. Because so I think people they like when they can hear not just how I've helped somebody, but like what I've been through and how I manage stuff myself. So that's the one thing that's missing. And then the second piece is now that's where I'm getting because I had it in my head. It was transparency. Oh, and then the second piece, I got it. It's accountability.
Mm.
It's accountability. Accountability, being able to be accountable. So you talked earlier about the couple who's in session and they're looking at their partner and they want them to do whatever, go to therapy or do more in a relationship, whatever. But accountability is missing from us. Like we have to take more accountability and not put the onus on somebody else or point so many fingers.
I want to stay there because I know somebody
Mhm.
listening. What does accountability look like for yourself? Like, how do you hold yourself accountable?
Me personally,
Just
or
in general, like I know, for example, like for me, I got a work plan that holds me accountable. Like it is
mhm.
making sure that I'm checking off certain boxes, whether it be fatherhood, work, uh being a husband, being in these different personal, like did I go to the gym
Right,
this
right.
morning? So that holds me accountable. What are some techniques you give out as a coach or a therapist that hold people accountable?
One, make sure you follow up with them. So like if you're in therapy or if you have a coach, follow up with your person. Somebody asked me today, they said, what's the purpose of this homework? Like, we've been meeting, I want to know. And I said, well, it's accountability. Like me and you talking for this hour is great, but you want change and transformation in your real life, not just feeling good in this hour. So my way of holding my people accountable is through the homework. And it varies on person to person and situation to situation. I hold myself accountable by one, like following through. So like doing things like this podcast, like this was good for me to show up, do the work. It keeps me grounded. It's enjoyable to just have these conversations. And then the last thing I would say for myself and for other people, accountability comes with being really honest with yourself. Like we're not great in all areas. We have shortcomings that we need to work on. Sometimes we need to give ourselves grace, but sometimes we need to step it up too. So journal about those experiences. Talk to a therapist about what you have going on and have a really great support system too, because all of those components together, that'll keep you more accountable than just trying to do it on your own.
All right, so I got another therapeutic question. And that's one that as a part of the organization that I'm working with, Black Men Hill, we kind of struggle with, where we are in this space, and I'll speak for myself. I am in this space to pushing people to be more open to the idea of therapy, right? But that the mental health system is overwhelmed. Therapists, I bet you have a bunch of people in your waiting line that's waiting to see you. You get what I mean? And so
Yeah.
we share a lot about why people should get involved in mental health, but I don't think the system is ready for the capacity of the in which people need it, if that makes sense. What are your thoughts around that?
I think it's true. A lot of therapists are, we have wait lists or we're booked out, um, or we're not taking any clients. I would say one thing that I think is missing, it kind of goes back to your question about the wellness conversation. Therapy has traditionally been practiced in a one-on-one setting. But I bet in order to meet the needs of everybody, you're going to see much more group therapy,
Mm,
which means now you're healing in a space with other people, not just you and your therapist. That's what needs to happen so that we can reach more people. Because right now you're not going to produce enough black therapists, black male therapists to meet the need, or people say, "Oh, I have a black therapist or a culturally competent therapist." The best way to shift that right now would be to be open to and support the idea of group therapy.
What has been some of the barriers to that initially? Like that seems like a no brainer. Why isn't that more like prominent?
I just think it hasn't been talked about. We probably haven't figured out the logistics of it, whether that's going to be in an online space. And like, if a lot of practitioners are working in the private practice, they may feel like, okay, well, how do I accommodate this? Or how do I get people in and out at a time that makes sense for me as a clinician and then them as the client? So I think that it's just something that people think about when I think of therapy. Initially, I think of one-on-one,
Mm.
individual. What about for you?
Oh, I never even thought about that. Like that's a great point. Like when you think of therapy, it always is one on one. And why isn't it like why isn't it looked at as a different concept? I never even thought about that. Like, but it is a one on one thing. But also, when you talk about coaching earlier, coaching has many levels. You have a quarterback coach, and then you could have an offensive coordinator that just with the offense, and then you have the full
Yeah.
team coach that gives everyone that. So I never thought about of therapy being in that capacity where it has to that different component to it.
Yeah, and I do a group coaching format for my clients, and this is the thing. It helps people know that one, they're not the only one struggling with this mindset or confidence issue, and you get a chance to see somebody else achieve something. And you're like, oh, if he or she did that, bet I know I can do it.
Mm.
I know even myself, like I've been in a part of a lot of group coaching programs, and it's great because I get to meet people and shoot, it's just the network and everything, like the camaraderie from being in a group. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the fellowship and everything that
Definitely.
comes with it. I got one last question that I haven't heard. I think with the rise of the Me Too movement, which was a few years back, but I know they still doing the work out here, but it isn't as trendy as it was. I think came the rise of the term toxic masculinity. Um, is not, and again with that, you don't hear people talk about it too much. What are your thoughts around toxic masculinity?
I mean, I think it can be a real thing where guys are feeling like they have to do this, and that to put on this persona to appear this way. But if we peel back the layers of toxic masculinity, where does it come from? What is it rooted in? And then what are we doing to promote it? And then what can we do to break it down? The same thing with toxic positivity. When you're not being real and honest about what's going on, you're just like, oh, things will be better, or just wait for another day. That's not healthy. That's not realistic. So with toxic masculinity, it falls in that same arena where we're not being honest with ourselves. We're not letting people be human. As a man, men have both a masculine side and we have feminine sides too. So we need to be able to embrace that and not punish somebody for showing versatility in who they are.
I think you did a full length job of going back to when I asked about the gentleman's capacity word. And so when you say men have a feminine and a masculine side, what is that what does that look like? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so we are emotional. We're human. We have feelings, and I think that a lot of times we are conditioned to still stifle those feelings. So when we say somebody says, "How you feeling?" and then the man says, "Oh, I'm feeling down. I'm feeling sad, depressed, or I'm feeling embarrassed, ashamed," like anything other than what a typical response may be, like, "I'm feeling good," or "I'm feeling pissed off." We're like, "Oh, really?" Like we don't. It's like almost we don't believe that the man can have those type of emotions. But you and I know, holding space for brothers, like we're human. We do feel those emotions.
Yeah, I just learned the value of I don't know, you probably have the therapeutic term of it, but the feelings will, and having
Mm-hmm.
those like deeper levels of like, all right, the inner will has the basis level that we all probably use, and then
Yep.
outwards. And I'm like, man, that really it's like when someone asks you how you doing, I literally have to check in with myself to identify that feeling instead of just, oh, I'm straight or I'm cool or I'm all right,
Yeah.
because you don't know what all right, straight or cool, what does that mean? Like where's the vocabulary
Mm-hmm.
and language that identifies what that means? I think a lot of us are still learning that.
Yeah, because we can. I'm straight. It's a meme going on around. Did you see it?
Which one?
Where it said "I'm straight" can mean so many things. I'm
Yeah.
straight. Do you need some money? I'm straight. Do you need? Yeah. So I'm straight. We say that a lot. We've been saying that for like since I was young. You good? I'm straight. I'm straight.
As we begin to close out, I ask this question a lot just to get the different perspectives to show that it looks different for everyone. What does wellness mean to you?
Being able to own who you are and do the things that make you happy.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Owning who you are and doing what makes me happy. What I guess you would say, go get a coach or what's the first steps to a person who don't know what makes them happy or who don't know who they are? What should they be starting doing today?
I would say go get a but I would also say like do some reflection too. So spend some time with yourself. A lot of us don't know who we are. We're looking at other people and we're doing the comparison thing, and that's yielding us poor results because I don't want to be just like Reginald.
Right.
I shouldn't aspire. I'm my own person, and that takes some soul searching to do to find out, what that is and what that truly looks like. So
No, I
you
love it.
can't rush it, but definitely want to lean into it.
Mm. Is there anything you want to leave the people before we let you get out of here and enjoy the rest of your day?
No, Brian, man, this was good. This was good. I really appreciate it. I will say, go check out my podcast because I'm getting used to promoting the podcast, right? So Peace and Prosperity Podcast. Go check us out. We have some great episodes and even more episodes in the book. So and then follow me on social media at J Phillips MSW, JPHILLIPS MSW. That's on Instagram, Facebook. And other than that, yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah, no, I'll make sure to put the link to everything you have going on in the description, and his social media handle be over our heads like we usually do with the recordings. And then on that note, make sure you go to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review on Apple, man. I know how much these reviews help make podcasts go the way that they go, and share this conversation with someone so that way they can tune into all of the things that Jason has going on, and you can continue to get these different perspectives and jewels that he is dropping. um and on that note, remember that this platform has never been about being a replacement to therapy. It's an alternative place where people share therapeutic stories. Thank you for listening.